Alright then, check this out. Yeah, how about this, huh? Yeah, change the focus. Now, this is a book you've heard of. Like, you've either read Siddhartha or you read Steppenwolf. Those are the two, like, famous works by Herman Hesse. This is the one that I've read, Siddhartha, the first one that I read way back in the day. It's about this guy named Siddhartha during the days when the Buddha walked the earth. Gautama, I think is how you pronounce his name. And it follows Siddhartha, who shares his name with Gautama, the Buddha. As Siddhartha, this fictional character, is a young Brahmin's son who clearly has an aptitude for spirituality, and it follows his life as he uses who he is, following his spirit to navigate his life's lessons, with the goal being oneness with God and freedom from the endless cycle of birth and death, which you know about. This is actually a reread for me. This was the first Herman Hesse book I read during the halcyon days of 2012, when the world was just ending, and I was a wayward street urchin in Hollywood, and I happened upon a copy of Siddhartha on a stump of a palm tree, and I read it, the first page or so, and thought, oh, this book is about me, I'm this guy. That's what I always think when I read any book. But upon this reread, it took me not even a paragraph to be like, oh, I'm nothing like this guy. This guy is just way too advanced for me. I mean, in the first paragraph, he talks about him as a Brahmin youth, having mastered the art of concentration, which if you're a yogi or you know anything about Patanjali's 8-limb path of yoga, concentration is like the 6th limb, and it goes in order. It's like do's, don'ts, sitting still, life force control, interiorization of your senses, concentration, meditation, oneness. Yeah, so this guy is like, from the jump, very far along the path. Humbled is the word. When I read that, I was like, oh, I should probably have shut up 10 years ago and just roll with it, baby. I also want to say that this translation, this Dover Thrift Edition translated by Stanley Applebaum, is way more readable than the other translations that I've been reading. The Demian, which is Still My Heart and Soul, and Narcisse and Goldman. This is a super readable translation, and is full of like these footnotes that explain when Herman Hesse was kind of just throwing words in there where maybe they didn't belong, which really wasn't necessary. I'm not here to nitpick whether someone is using Sanskrit correctly. I mean, let's be real. Okay, well, let's get right into the cliff notes so that we can explain how I actually feel about this book. So go to right here to skip me telling you the basics of the story, which you shouldn't do, really. Anyway, he's a Brahmin prodigy. Everyone loves Siddhartha. Everyone loves this kid. He's going places, and his friend Govinda sees him and is like, this guy is not gonna just be another preacher Brahmin performing rituals every day and not really having real realization. This guy can really have realization. So wherever he is going, I'm gonna go. Siddhartha, as a youth, is looking around at his father and everyone he knows, and he's like, we're the priests and we don't know anything. We're not one with God. He can concentrate and see himself in concentration, but he can't be himself. He can't achieve that oneness. He sees these, they use the term samanas. They're ascetics, wandering ascetics, and they're walking through just mad, dusty, hungry, all kinds of effed up. But Siddhartha vibes with their absolute disregard for the physical world, even their own physical bodies. And he's like, they're going somewhere where I want to be. So he decides that's what I'm going to do. And he tells his homie Govinda, and Govinda's like, damn, I don't want to do that. Siddhartha kind of chides him because he could tell that he don't want to do it, but he kind of knows he has to and he should. After 3 years of being with them, he's learned some cool magic tricks. He can jump out of his body whenever he wants, but he comes back down to his body and it's again hunger, and restlessness, and he has to go through this whole cycle of existence again. I'm not closer to my actual goal. This isn't the path either, and no one here has what I want either. So he's delineated again what he doesn't want. And at this point, there's these talks, these rumors going around about some cat named the Buddha. Sure, Gautama, the Buddha, whatever. Anyway, he's gaining popularity. They're hearing whispers of it in their camp as they wander. And him and Govinda, they're like, maybe we should go in and see this cat. Let's do it, because we're wasting our time here. When they see him, Siddhartha can tell based on how he stands, based on his smile, his movements. Everything about him exudes truth, exudes absoluteness, exudes like oneness. So he's like, okay, this guy is doing it. This is the guy who's doing it. So when they sit down and they hear him speak, Govinda's all in. He's like, I'm joining this cat. I want to be with this guy. And he's sure Siddhartha's going to do it, but Siddhartha has an issue with the teaching. And he tells the Buddha, Gautama's like, yeah, you're right about that. That's interesting. But you know, I don't traffic in semantics, right? He breaks off with Govinda and goes on his own path. And that conversation with the Buddha sparked something in him where he started enjoying the world. And he got these dreams of being with this beautiful woman. And he crossed the river because he just felt drawn in that direction. He crossed the river with some ferrymen who was real chill. And when he goes into this village, he sees this courtesan named Kamala. And he's like, you're my girlfriend now. She's, entertains him a little bit. And when he lets it slip that he can read and write, she tells him where he can go and get a job with some businessman. And he starts to work with this guy, and he gets mad money. And eventually he starts just exhausting the Kama Sutra with Kamala. And he spends about 20 years overall living this worldly life as a businessman. In his heart, though, he still is completely detached, for the most part, from all the people that he's with, unable to really love with this freedom and abandon that they have. But eventually that takes a toll on him after so many years. He starts losing his abilities. He can't fast like he used to fast. He's not as patient as he used to be. And he gets addicted to gambling. His hatred for the physical world manifests itself in his desire to throw all of his money away. And then he'll quickly gather more of it. But then that hatred to just throw it away on a roll of dice, like that caught him, So he lost virtue and gained vice. On one of his real low cycles, he had these dreams of just getting old and of something beautiful dying, a golden bird dying, and he realized that he had gone astray or something, yada yada. He decides to up and leave everything. He just goes down to the river bank and decides, I'm gonna kill myself. And he hears from the river a real slight, tiny little ohm. And that ohm, I don't know, it kind of helped him out, made him less suicidal. Had a realization, fell asleep, and slept like a log. And when he woke up, there was Govinda watching over him. Because Govinda just saw a rich guy sleeping by the river and thought, this guy's gonna get attacked by some wolves or something. I better just hang tight to make sure he's okay. He wakes up, doesn't realize it's Siddhartha dressed in those, nice little, harem pants or whatever. After they chop it up for a little bit, Govinda gets a little shook at how far Siddhartha had fell. But Siddhartha decides, well, wherever I go from now on, I'm very happy to be free of all the things that I was. And I really like this river. And so he goes down to the ferryman and is like, hey man, I would really like to work with you and just be here. I was here about 20 years ago, and do you remember me? I remember you. Yeah, come on, man. And they start just being buddies. And the ferryman's name is Vasudev, which, if you know, is also the name of Krishna's father. And Vasudev, he's essentially Siddhartha's guru, because he teaches him to listen to the river, because the river taught Vasudev everything. They just start becoming more like each other. They start to appear like each other, share thoughts, and be happy to share thoughts, and listen to the river and be happy to hear the same things from the river. It would have to have been 10 or so years or 12 years. Kamala goes to see the Buddha before he dies, and as they're going, she's with her young son, whose name is Siddhartha.
You are are the father.
Kamala gets bit by a spider or a snake or something, and she's dying, and her and Siddhartha are calling for help, and Vasudev and Siddhartha, they take care of them, and she dies, and so Siddhartha is with Siddhartha, son is with dad, and he don't want to be with his dad because he doesn't know his dad, but he loves his son and is trying to win him over with patience and love, but he's a spoiled brat who came up in a rich house, used to having servants and stuff to do, and now he's got these two old geezers who just row boats and smile all day. He don't want to be there. And Vasudev tries to tell him, like, man, don't you think that's kind of in its own way a little bit of torture to your son? And so Vasudev lets Siddhartha let him deal with his karma here until Siddhartha, the child, decides to run away completely, breaks the oar on the other side of the river, and just disappears from his dad. And when the father can't find him anymore, he's defeated, he goes back with Vasudev, and they just continue life. And he realizes that this was a karmic loop closing. Just as he ran away from his father when he was young to join the Samanas, his son runs away from him. Eventually everything chills out. Him and Vasudev, they become Siddhartha becomes perfected, and Vasudev's like, my work here's done, so he walks into the river. He walks into the forest to go leave his body somewhere. And so an elderly Govinda is crossing the river one more time, and he doesn't recognize Siddhartha again, but they realize they're each other, yada yada. Govinda knows something's up, so he asks Siddhartha what he's learned in his life, and Siddhartha gives him this crazy kind of speech, this teaching about how samsara, which is the physical world, or Maya they would call it in Hinduism, is part and parcel with nirvana, or samadhi in Hinduism. So he gives Govinda the same kind of broken rhetoric that the Buddha gave Siddhartha all those years ago. And this bothers Govinda because he knows it doesn't make sense, but he knows as well that from his very countenance, Siddhartha has attained it. He has something. So he asks Siddhartha, can you give me something that I can take home, something that I can really know? And Siddhartha gives him this vision of a multiplicity of forms in various states of being, of cause and effect all at one time, covered with this clear veneer of Siddhartha's placid smile. And that's it. That's the end of the book. I actually don't have too much to reflect on here. It occurred to me actually when Vasudev and Siddhartha were discussing, they called it time doesn't exist. That's what they said. That the past and the present and the future all exist at the same time, just as the water of the river exists where you are, and at the fall and at its mouth. And I thought to myself, yeah, okay, fine. I can read that and I can grasp a hold of it as a concept, but do I know it as an experience, right? The little voice in my head says, of course you do, but I might know it without having words to attach to it. To me, it is like dogma. It reminded me of this issue that I've been having as I've been reading. I always read things thinking that I'm reading it wrong because I only can read a book and compare it to the things that I know, experiences that I've had, or other things in the book to see what makes sense. If it doesn't make sense with itself, if it doesn't make sense with my own understanding. But that to me is, you might think of that as reason or scientific, but to me it's like gossiping with myself. I read this book and I'm just like a bored retail worker just talking about it and comparing it to things like I don't have anything better to do. I don't take it for what it actually is. I don't take it for the actual experience, the actual meaning of the words as they are. I only take the meaning of the words as they are to me, which I can't do with this book, because this book is about something that I have not experienced consciously. So I can't look at Siddhartha's enlightenment experience and think, oh, yeah, that's how it worked for me back in 2015 when I had Nirvikalpa Samadhi and I've been chill ever since. No, I can't do that. Nor can I look at other enlightened masters and their experiences and be like, oh yeah, that's how it happened for Ramakrishna, or yeah, that's how it happened for Anandamoy Ma, because I just don't understand it to the level that I can look at other people's enlightenment experiences and say who's right and who's wrong. If that were the case, wouldn't the Pharisees have been able to parse out Christ as something special or different instead of like seeing him as like an enemy alone? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Maybe they did. I don't freaking know. You know, this thing goes like deep in every direction. I can't reflect on it. You know what I mean? That's the long and short of it. That's all I have to say about that. Otherwise, it's a fine book. I prefer Demian. But that's just me. Okay, kids. It's been real. I will see you when I see you.
You know what the most dangerous thing in America is, right?